I'm sure you see people each and every day who drive expensive cars, live in massive homes, and think to yourself, they must be set for life. Don't worry, I've asked myself the same question. We all grow up believing that first million is the magic finish line, the moment you finally make it and all the pressure just melts away. But what I've come to learn from talking to people who've actually crossed that threshold is something they rarely admit out loud. That first million doesn't usually bring peace. It brings a new and often heavier kind of pressure. The race isn't over. You've just qualified for a much more complicated and stressful league. But what tends to surprise people is how often the opposite is true. Among those who have actually crossed that milestone, the first million does not usually bring relief. Instead, it marks a shift. The pressure does not disappear. It changes shape. The rules that applied before no longer work the same way, and the margin for error becomes smaller, not larger. Here is why the wealthy often feel more pressure after reaching a $1 million portfolio. What changes at this level is not just the amount of money involved, but the role money plays. That first million is almost never sitting as usable cash. It exists as equity tied up in homes, retirement accounts, businesses, or long-term investments. On paper, the number looks impressive. In real life, it is largely untouchable. It represents stability and potential, not freedom to spend. This creates a subtle tension. Wealth appears abundant from the outside, but liquidity is often limited. Large purchases still require financing, planning, and ongoing obligations. What looks like success becomes a structure that must be maintained. As wealth increases, obligations tend to grow alongside it. Larger homes come with higher taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Vehicles, memberships, schooling, and lifestyle choices quietly raise the baseline cost of living. These expenses do not feel extravagant individually, but together they form a permanent monthly commitment. The million becomes less of a cushion and more of a foundation that cannot be disturbed. Any threat to income or portfolio value suddenly carries more weight than it did before. Another shift happens socially. Wealth changes the environment people operate in. Neighborhoods change. Professional circles change. Expectations change. The comparison group quietly resets. What once felt like extraordinary success begins to feel average within a new peer group. A portfolio that once represented years of sacrifice now feels small compared to others who are further along. This comparison is rarely intentional, but it is unavoidable. The pressure becomes less about growth and more about positioning. The fear is no longer being poor again, but being left behind. This shift alters how money is experienced emotionally. Investing, which once felt hopeful and exciting, becomes a source of anxiety. Losses feel heavier because there is more to lose. Volatility feels personal because the stakes are higher. A market downturn no longer threatens future goals in theory. It threatens the life that has already been built. The mindset changes from accumulation to preservation. That transition is difficult. Preserving wealth requires restraint, patience, and constant awareness. It is a defensive posture rather than an ambitious one. At this stage, even strong returns can feel insufficient. Growth is no longer celebrated in isolation. It is measured against inflation, taxes, lifestyle costs, and future obligations. A 10% return may look good on paper, but emotionally, it can feel like merely keeping up. The portfolio is expected to do more work than before. It must support current stability while also securing future independence. This creates pressure that is rarely acknowledged publicly. For many wealthy individuals, income remains the backbone of financial security, even after reaching seven figures. High-paying careers often play a significant role in building that first million. Over time, the lifestyle becomes structured around that income level. Expenses align with earnings. Savings and investments assume continued cash flow. Walking away from work becomes complicated. The job that enabled wealth accumulation becomes something that must be maintained to protect it. This is where pressure intensifies. Financial success begins to demand consistency at a level that is difficult to sustain indefinitely. The idea of freedom becomes more abstract at this point. There is wealth, but there is also responsibility. There is comfort, but there is also dependency. The pressure is not visible, but it is constant. Every decision is weighed against what it could disrupt. Risk tolerance decreases not because confidence is gone, but because the cost of mistakes is higher. This cautious mindset can feel restrictive, even when everything appears successful from the outside. Another layer of pressure comes from silence. Wealth isolates in subtle ways. Financial concerns at this level are not easily shared. Discussing market stress, tax exposure, or asset protection can sound insensitive to those dealing with basic financial insecurity. As a result, Concerns remain internal. This isolation makes stress feel heavier. Problems cannot be openly discussed without appearing ungrateful or detached. The emotional weight accumulates quietly. At the same time, expectations shift internally. Achieving a long-term goal often creates an unexpected vacuum. The struggle that once provided direction disappears. The question becomes harder to answer. What now? If the goal was $1 million and it has been reached, the lack of emotional resolution can feel disorienting. Some pursue more wealth. Others pursue status, legacy, or meaning. But the absence of a clear next chapter adds another form of pressure. One that has nothing to do with numbers. The wealthy also become more aware of fragility. Economic cycles feel closer. Policy changes matter more. Market corrections are no longer abstract events. Wealth brings clarity, but it also brings awareness of how easily conditions can change. This awareness increases vigilance, which in turn increases mental load. Money stops being something that simply grows and starts being something that must be managed continuously. Over time, the narrative of success changes. Wealth is no longer measured by how much is earned, but by how stable life feels. The anxiety that follows the first million is not a sign of failure. It is a natural response to responsibility. Wealth magnifies decisions. It sharpens consequences. It removes certain problems while introducing others that are quieter, but no less real. This is why the idea that money eliminates pressure is incomplete. It changes the type of pressure instead. Early financial stress is loud and immediate. Later financial stress is quiet and persistent. One is about survival. The other is about maintenance. Both require energy, both shape behavior. Those who navigate this stage successfully tend to shift their focus. Instead of chasing more, they begin structuring their finances for resilience. Simplicity becomes valuable. Stability becomes a priority. Systems replace constant decision-making. The goal slowly moves away from growth at all costs and toward sustainability. The real relief does not come from hitting a specific number. It comes from reducing dependency. When wealth no longer relies on constant income, when lifestyle costs are aligned with sustainable returns, and when money begins to serve life instead of dominating it, pressure starts to ease. That moment is not marked by a headline number. It is marked by a feeling of control. The first million is not a finish line. It is a transition point. It separates building from protecting. It introduces new responsibilities that demand a different mindset. The pressure experienced at this stage is not a failure of wealth, but a reflection of its complexity. Those who understand this stop chasing relief through more accumulation and start designing systems that support peace. In the end, the wealthiest individuals are not defined by how much they own, but by how calmly they live with what they have. The pressure fades not when the numbers grow larger, but when money is structured to require less attention. That is when wealth begins to feel like freedom rather than obligation.